Good evening and welcome to the first of two special editions of Pull here at the 5th Annual U.S.-Afghan Business Matchmaking Conference at the Ronald Reagan International Trade Center in Washington, D.C. This yearly conference is an opportunity for U.S. companies to interact with Afghan businesses and to promote partnerships between companies from the U.S. and Afghanistan. One of the conference highlights were presentations by two of Ambassador Richard Holbrooke's key advisors.
One of the other obstacles that we need, or challenges that we need to meet in order to...
Later, we'll sit down with Otto Gonzalez, the Senior Agriculture Advisor to Ambassador Holbrooke.
And we want to begin planning now for what comes after the elections. I'm speaking about the political and the economic investments that need to be made and the new partnerships that need to be formed to help improve the lives of millions of Afghans.
But first, we'll sit down with Paul Jones, Deputy to the Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, Richard Holbrooke. You just addressed a large gathering of Afghan and American business people. What was the main message that you wanted to convey to them?
Mariam, the main message is one of partnership, that we have a great partnership between the private sector in America and Afghanistan and the governments of America and Afghanistan for the future prosperity of the country and the people in Afghanistan. We talked about how political stability, economic stability, and security are all linked up together, and that with the support of everyone in the room, we think we can make a real difference in the lives of Afghans throughout the country.
So economic development is an important part of the entire strategy.
It's a really critical part. I mean, only when a country is feeling optimistic and hopeful about the future and people have jobs and have confidence in their government, can a country that has been in a very difficult situation for some time emerge into a more secure and prosperous future. So one of our key elements, and I think you'll talk to my colleague in a moment about our agricultural strategy, but we're very interested in helping to rebuild the agricultural success of Afghanistan and be true partners. We're a country, America, originally of agriculture, and we'd like to rekindle that partnership with Afghanistan.
I'll be happy to take you.
A major part of Ambassador Holbrooke's development strategy has been to try to perhaps funnel more assistance through the Afghan ministries rather than through foreign contractors. Is this going to be possible, though, given the requirements for the use of U.S. funding?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mariam. We have 4 ministries are already certified to receive direct U.S. assistance, and we're looking to do the same. We have certain certification requirements that our Congress imposes on the executive branch of the United States throughout the world, and we are working with a number of other ministries in order to meet those standards so that when we give assistance to the U.S. taxpayer money, that we have confidence that it's going to end up to the actual goals that the Congress designated it to be. So we actually can do more, and we want to do more, and we think that process will better support the government and better support the people of Afghanistan.
There's been some criticism, that the aid doesn't reach the village level. What has been the major challenges in the U.S. assistance to getting it to the village level in Afghanistan?
Yeah, it is a big challenge, and it's not a surprising challenge with how widespread and variegated the country is. We have assistance programs at the national level, at the provincial level, and at the local level. And what we want to do is develop greater, closer partnerships so that we can assist at the local level and at the national level in ways that really help people in the villages feel a benefit quite quickly. What we don't want to do is create parallel structures that leave out the government or the non-governmental sector of Afghanistan, because that doesn't do any of us any good to simply work on our own separate from the Afghan institutions. So we're working, I think, quite successfully at the local level and the national level. It'll take time, but we're pushing that agenda.
And as part of the shifts in development strategy, there's this civilian surge that's been talked about, and there's plans to send more development assistance workers from the U.S. to Afghanistan. About how many people are expected to be sent over, and what would their role be on the ground?
Yeah. At the beginning of this year, in January, there were about 320 or 30 American civilians in Afghanistan, overall, Kabul and outside. By the end of the year, there's going to be close to 970 or so. So that's a pretty significant increase. Why are we doing that? There are a lot of different areas in which those people are working. One major one is the area of agriculture, which we've spoken about. So we have a significant number of new advisors from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. These are people who work in the United States in these agricultural fields, who are going out to the field to help with the Afghan organizations on agricultural development. But we also have from our U.S. U.S. Agency for International Development a significant increase, and that is also so we can get the assistance down to the local level. So we have more people who can do, who have the authority in our system to work out financial arrangements with Afghan institutions at the local level. We have judicial, we have people involved in law enforcement, a whole range of civilians, but all for the purpose of trying to build the civilian capacity in Afghanistan.
So will these development advisors be working directly with the Afghan government? Are they working within the PRTs in the field, or both?
Well, the platform from which they work in the fields are PRTs, Provincial Reconstruction Teams, and also we're going to stand up district support teams to actually, but we're going to do this in partnership and tandem with Afghan government representatives. So we're in discussions with about a half a dozen Afghan ministries as well as local officials, so that in some of the areas that had been insecure, that the international coalition forces can help the Afghan security forces secure, that we very quickly behind that bring in Afghan government representatives with internationals, a large number of them Americans, in order to provide the assistance so that they can move forward.
You just mentioned district development teams. How is this going to be different? Is this something new that's being implemented?
We're hoping in the next week, over the next weeks, to add in maybe 7 or 8 or 10 more civilians who will be there with the security forces and be able to work on a daily basis with the district government. That's a district support team.
Some Afghans appreciate the assistance that's coming in, I think, with the new development advisors, but some would say that there's been a lot of reports, there's been a lot of advice, and it's well needed in intention, but then the actual programs that are needed to implement, to bring about the change, either don't happen or are very slow. Are there plans to actually then implement programs with what the advisors then advise need to happen?
Yeah, we have, I think there's been historically over the last years, there's been a disconnect between our contracting process and our civilian assistance personnel. And that is what we are doing, what we are trying to do is to bring that together so that our assistance is much more closely linked with the people we are deploying and with the government and the other Afghanistan organizations and institutions. So we're not going to have a parallel structure over here with assistance programs and other people talking to the government without the benefit of linking those up together.
Can you tell us about some of the cross-border programs or economic development that will both benefit Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Yeah, and there's been tremendous progress in closing a deal that we understand should be closed by the end of this year, which will allow more Afghan products to transit out of Afghanistan through Pakistan. We also are working in very specific ways about trying to open up the border crossing so there isn't these long lines of trucks, and there's a much more efficient way to review the cargo and to approve products going across. In addition to that, we have pressed extremely hard on an issue that's been out there a long time, but it's American legislation called Reconstruction Opportunity Zone legislation. And this would allow significantly lower tariffs for products coming from Afghanistan and certain products coming from Afghanistan and the border region of Pakistan. It's very hard to get trade legislation through the American Congress, but we think we have an opportunity here to do this, and it will, we believe, stimulate economic activity in both regions.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
We'll sit down with Otto Gonzalez, the Senior Agricultural Advisor to Ambassador Holbrooke,
after this. Joining me now is Otto Gonzalez, Senior Agricultural Advisor for U.S. Special Representative Richard Holbrooke. As of today, there are about 14 USDA advisors in Afghanistan. What are the plans to increase the number of advisors, and what would their roles be inside the country?
Oh, well, thanks for that question. The plans are to go to a total of 64 advisors in the next few months. So by the end of December, we will have moved from the current 14 to 64. And these advisors we draw from throughout the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So they come with a variety of different areas of technical specialty. Some of them are engineers, some of them are soil conservationists, soil scientists, some of them are veterinarians, others have a plant health background, some may have farm management and agribusiness, but we put them all together there. They work as a team. They help each other as far as sometimes one may travel from one location to another to provide his or her expertise. But we will have 64 by the end of this year.
And will these advisors be working with the Ministry of Agriculture or within U.S. government PRTs?
Well, they really both for the most part. We will have, of those 64, 55 of them will be out amongst the provinces. So some will be on provincial reconstruction teams or PRTs, as you mentioned. Some will be at the new district support teams. Others will be working with the U.S. Army National Guard and agribusiness development teams, and still some others will be at the regional command level or at the task force command. The ones in Kabul will provide support to the PRT program, as well as several who will be as subject matter experts working in the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock, providing expertise that the different programs of the ministry, such as agriculture production and productivity, natural resource management, economic regeneration, change management, will all draw on the expertise of these specialists.
There's many Afghans, especially Afghan Americans, who have expertise in Afghanistan's agricultural system before the time of the conflict, yes. And so they feel they have a special perspective to share. Is there any effort to bring them into this process and to have them involved?
Well, what we're looking to do in all of the work is to partner as much as we can with Afghan institutions, particularly the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock, down at the PRT level, working with farmer organizations and other local organizations. As far as Afghan Americans, which may want to be involved, one of the things we're trying to do right now is to identify opportunities for potential involvement. I know just myself over the past several weeks since, actually I should say over the past few months since I've been on the staff of Ambassador Holbrooke, I've met with a number of different members of the diaspora who have been interested. They have had activities in Afghanistan and are looking for new ways to become more involved. So we're always very interested in that.
Ambassador Holbrooke has called for a change in U.S. narcotics policy, one that doesn't focus so much on eradication, but that targets drug smugglers and narcotics labs. What was the reason for this shift in policy, and has there been any outcomes from the new policy?
Well, a key reason for the shift, as Ambassador Holbrooke himself has stated, is when one looks back over some of the activities that we've been engaged in and how they've been funded, the U.S. government was spending more on the eradication of poppy than it was actually on promoting agriculture. And as Ambassador Holbrooke determined, and many others as well who've applauded him on this, is that we look at agriculture as really the mainstay, the sector which has the greatest economic potential for Afghanistan. And if we're going to work to build that potential and realize that potential and work directly with the Afghan farmer, the way to do that is to promote agriculture more so than focusing on the eradication of the poppy.
What was your impression of Afghan farmers?
My impression of Afghan farmers is that they are an extremely experienced group of people, extremely dedicated, knowledgeable. They have not only their own experience, but the experience of their fathers and others which has been passed to them. And there is, I've always seen a very strong determination to use the land as properly as possible, to have productive agriculture, healthy livestock. Their aspirations are the ones that we find for farmers or herders all around the world. But the key challenges that they have to face, which many others have not had to face in different parts of the world, has been the destruction of the infrastructure which has taken place over the whole period of the war, the loss of a lot of information, the destruction of orchards, all of these different things. So that I see the Afghan farmer as a person who is dedicated and committed to moving ahead despite all of the challenges that face them. And so that's why I know from my colleagues in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as others in the U.S. Agency for International Development and our colleagues in the U.S. military, they're quite inspired by this dedication, because they look at what the Afghan farmer has to deal with. Again, not only the legacy of all the challenges that have come through the periods of the war, but even also the natural harshness that there is in Afghanistan with the dry winds and the difficult landscape. Yet, through all that, Afghan farmers have shown themselves able to produce some of the most recognized and desired varieties of horticultural crops in that whole part of the world. Herds of sheep and goats and other livestock which can be healthy and which can provide a product such as the cashmere, which we've heard about in the sessions today here, which again desired throughout the world. And of course the Afghan farmer just this past season with thankfully good precipitation had a bumper wheat crop. So we know that the Afghan farmers can produce excellent crops that are well recognized around that whole part of the world. What we want to do is partner with those farmers to take advantage in ways that they haven't been able to before, to enter these foreign markets and to produce more for their own families.
I'll have more with Mr. Gonzalez after this. Welcome back, continuing our conversation with Mr. Gonzalez. Now, USDA generally focuses on helping American farmers. There is this program for Afghanistan being a special country of interest. Did you see any similarities between the challenges that Afghan farmers face and that American farmers may have faced?
Yes, certainly so, and particularly when we think about some of the challenges that the Afghan farmers face. We often look back in our own history in the United States of America, and I think a key turning point in our own history agriculturally, we can look back in the 1930s. In the 1930s, in the United States of America, we faced a time when we had a very difficult economic situation, and we also had a very difficult situation as far as natural resources or soil and water go. We had large parts of the country that that did not have fertile soil, where the soil was blowing away and would fill the sky with dust, often as we see in Afghanistan. And it's out of that period within the United States that we formed a Soil Conservation Service as part of our U.S. Department of Agriculture, and had a very strong focus on trying to help farmers to improve the management of the soil, which of course is key if we're going to improve overall agricultural productivity. So we often think back about that time, and in looking back on that time, we see how fortunate we were able to overcome those challenges. Again, we didn't face the number of challenges and the severity of challenges that the Afghan farmer faces. Yet there were some similarities, and we know that with good agricultural extension, with good management of the soil, being able to capture some of that water would ordinarily be lost, and being able to provide that to the crops, that we can make important gains.
You mentioned Afghan farmers producing really good agriculture and horticultural products, but getting it to market has obviously been another challenge.
Yes.
With that, transportation is needed. Are there plans within the new assistance for Afghanistan for there to be assistance for transportation and getting products to market?
Well, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Mariam, when we look at our different objectives, we have 4 main objectives in our U.S. government agricultural assistance strategy, and each of these objectives supports one of the programs of the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock. So those objectives are to increase agricultural productivity, regenerate agribusiness, rehabilitate watersheds and improve irrigation infrastructure, and to increase the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock capacity to deliver services. If we take that second one, which is to regenerate agribusiness, within that, we're looking to facilitate the development of infrastructure, particularly infrastructure needed to link farmers with their markets. So that's everything from the value-added facilities, such as facilities for processing and packing and packaging of horticultural goods, or their processing in the dried fruits and nuts, or finishing for livestock, those kinds of things. But also part of that is the infrastructure needed to move a product and keep it fresh from the farm gate and to wherever it's going to be delivered. And so that infrastructure would include cold storage or cool storage, and actually is also going to need to work with those service providers who would be providing the transportation. So we look at it as part of the trying to develop the agricultural input sector. One input is the transportation to move product from, again, from the farm gate out.
A New York Times op-ed recently stated that America is sacrificing its blood and treasure in Afghanistan while China is reaping the benefits, given the investment in the copper sector. Should the U.S. government be doing more to promote U.S. investment, let's say specifically in the agribusiness sector?
Well, we very much do want to facilitate targeted investment. As a matter of fact, within our objective to regenerate agribusiness, one of the key technical points is to facilitate investment. It can be from the U.S., but it can be from other areas as well. One of the things we are looking to do is, in working with the ministry, helping the ministry in promoting private investment in agriculture. And again, as I mentioned, I've had the good fortune of meeting with a number of people here in Washington who, upon learning about the new approach of the U.S. government, have come by, some of them Afghan Americans, some of them here today that I have met previously. So we very much are trying to identify these opportunities for investment. We also work with other parts of the U.S. government, such as the U.S. Overseas Private Investment Corporation and other entities that are trying to facilitate U.S. investment in Afghanistan.
Have there been any U.S. companies who have either invested already in agribusiness or that are planning to do so with all this assistance?
I don't know at this point which ones are planning to invest, but I know there have been, again, a number of individuals who have expressed some interest. And what we're looking to do is to see how we can, I think as the conference is trying to do here, do a little bit of matchmaking and see how some of our U.S. government programs, as well as them looking at the private funds they have, how we can see some way to work together.
Former Congressman Charlie Wilson was a guest of this show, and he took us back to the period in history when the Soviets left Afghanistan. And he stated that the U.S. made a mistake in not providing development assistance to Afghanistan. And he mentioned agriculture as a specific area where the U.S. could have done more. Given your role within Ambassador Holbrooke's team focusing on agriculture, which is so important to Afghan livelihoods, do you see a long-term U.S. commitment to assist in this sector?
Well, while I can't speak to what the length of the U.S. commitment would be, because that is something I don't know, I do know that the kinds of work we're trying to do now, we hope will have a long-term impact. And we know that if we can work with farmers in helping them to access improved seed, the knowledge for improved cultivation practices, if we can help develop the infrastructure that is needed to move those products to market, if we can build capacity with the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock that will help them in their role as the agricultural leader for the Afghan government, help them in their role to facilitate cross-border trade and activities of that sort, they'll have a long-term impact. So whether or not the U.S. government is involved for the long-term or longer term, we aim to have activities that will stand the test of time.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated being here.
Thank you. My thanks to Paul Jones and Otto Gonzalez. See you next week for another edition of Pull.